day, another time that we meet here on Morning Prime. Hello, good morning from wherever you're waking up this morning, which is, of course, the 15th of February, 16th, I should say, of February, Thursday, 2023. And I'm glad that you're joining us today. Every Thursday, we have Sokoni coming your way, where we look at what is happening and current in the economic outlay of the country. And we're joined this morning by Engineer Patrick Obath, who is the chair of KEPSA Foundation. Also, we're joined by Professor Gituro Wanaina, who is the professor at the School of Business, University of Nairobi. We'll be joined also by Bill Okero. No, Bill Okero actually said he's not feeling very well this morning, so he cancelled. We'll be joined by Dr. Shem Ochodo, who's the chair of Kenya Diaspora Alliance, and Munyasi Sakwa, who is the chair of Kenya Vision 2030. So we have a lot to discuss today, and of course, headlining the front page of the business pages, especially the business daily, is all about De La Rue. And now that De La Rue will be folding business here in the country, there seems to be another crisis that is looming, and that is the checkbook crisis. We shall be discussing that. KQ as well. They seem to be still on choppy waters, or is it turbulent terrain as far as the future is concerned? We know the government has been very categorical that by the end of this year, there will be hands-off on KQ. But there's been a fast warning on defaulting of KQ paying its debt. What does it really portend for the national carrier? We shall be looking as well at the flower sector. Now that we have 400% water tariffs increase, that particular sector is adversely affected, and we have the council saying that will not be sustainable and job losses will not be inevitable. That and a raft of other issues that we'll be discussing today. But first things first, let's see what is fresh off the press this morning, and we see what the Standard is holding for us today. This is what you're waking up to the front page of the Standard. Revealed how Israeli hackers hit Ruto's team. How Israeli hackers hit Ruto's team is what is the splash today here on the front page of the Standard today. Whose dogs? That is a probing question. Whose dogs? And it says Israeli hackers accessed emails and private, let me try and zoom in, and private chats of two of President Ruto's advisors before and after last August's presidential election, posing as the aides and sending texts to unsuspecting targets as part of an intelligence gathering and disinformation campaign, an investigation shows. And this is tucked away on page 4 of the Standard today. And we have hacker Tel Hanan quoted as saying, "We like to be behind the scenes, and this is part of our power that the other side does not understand we exist." Now, 50 years, the age of hacker Tal Hanan, a former Israeli Special Forces operative who now works privately using the pseudonym George. You can follow the story inside the Standard today. Also, police storm Matiang'i's city home. Police yesterday stormed the current home of former Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i on the grounds that they had a court order to obtain CCTV footage to establish facts surrounding an alleged raid last week. And lawyer wants limit on land ownership. Man wants the High Court to compel Parliament to enact a law spelling out the minimum and the maximum acreage of land that an individual can own. This is on page 8. This is very interesting. And just adjacent to that is the real estate. This is a pull-out magazine that comes in handy for you every Thursday. All matters real estate, get all the wiser. But I wanted just to pick the brains of Professor Gituro on this one. This lawyer who wants limit on land ownership. Yeah. You think this is a good move? So there should be a limit on the acreage and how much you can actually own as a land.
Uh-huh. It's interesting. Probably it's what you do with that land than anything else. Limiting, probably, we need to look in the perspective, am I really encroaching on Patrick's land? If I'm not and somebody is willing to buy, you can go as much as you want. But when you have land for speculative purposes, what Ketich calls idle capital, which stands to be our ability, I think that's why we should come in and limit how much somebody can buy. Because if 100 acres or 200, 400 acres, and I want to sell, I should have that opportunity to sell. But we should go further because of looking productivity in terms of land in this country. Am I utilizing that land? Yes. I think that's why we should come in terms of am I making use of that land, than limiting, from my perspective, of that land.
I think it's a very interesting development there, Patrick Obath. Am I using that particular land? So there should be a period that is given that we can see, has there been any material or has it been of any material utility to you? 10 years, 20 years, you still have a wider, expansive acreage of land, but you're not doing anything with it at all. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of countries that are successful in growing their own food and improving, have got variations of what Prof is saying. I lived in Malaysia for some time, and there they've got a different land tenure system. The government owns all the land, and you are given, you're given a lease on the land, leasehold. So there is no freehold in that country. It's all leasehold, and you have lease of the land. If you do not use it within 3 years, the government takes it back.
Right.
Within 3 years. As that. 3 years.
Yeah.
You have got to put it into productive use, right?
Exactly.
So even, what they call traditional tribes, there are tribesmen there who live in villages, they're cultivating and they're producing crops. That is, they're using it, right? But if it is lying without being used for any reason at all, you give it back to the government and they give it to the next person who wants to use that. And they apply and they're given, right? So the leasehold is not as though it's for 99 years or whatever it is. The leasehold is for a certain period of time, and if you're using it and you continue using it, then you're given a time. Yeah. So if you're an investor, you're given that time. Right. So it's a very nice system that makes sure that land is utilized all the time rather than lying idle. Right.
Yeah.
The other system is where land is taxed on a incremental basis. Whereby, fine, you have it, you take it, you buy land, and you declare the use, and it's zoned and everything. And if you don't use it, then the land rates go up, and it goes up and goes up.
So it becomes very punitive.
It becomes punitive to keep it idle, right?
Yeah.
So I think I agree on that one in terms of the upper side. The one I would support is on the lower side. As a country, we are subdividing our land to oblivion. And if you look at certain parts of the country, especially the western side, and also in central province now, you're finding that people are subdividing because of our hereditary nature that we have. That, your son has got to subdivide the land to whatever it is.
And inheritance stuff.
Eventually, that piece of land becomes completely unproductive. So I, Patrick Obath, I inherit a quarter of an acre in Kano. And that quarter of an acre is not going to do anything for me at all. I'm going to sit there, and I have to then move out of that place and go somewhere else and try and find some production. However, if you limit to a certain minimum size that you cannot go below, say 1 acre. 1 acre is a good enough size for somebody to have a small house and be able to work productively on that 1 acre. Zero grazing, growing, whatever it is, have a couple of greenhouses, a few chickens and everything else, and they do not necessarily become subsistence farmers. They can become commercial farmers on that 1 acre, right? People are growing spices on an acre and making tons of money. So I believe that there should be a minimum size of land that you cannot subdivide below, right? And if you go below that, then you pay a hefty fee, like those who want to subdivide for houses in urban areas and stuff like that, Then there is a very clear rule about how much how much you got to pay to get to that kind of level. And that way it means that we keep sizes of land to such, we keep it to such a size that you will always have them productive. So I sort of half agree with the lawyer who wants the limits, but I agree on the lower side, but not on the upper side. The upper side, I think you need to put fiscal or regulatory requirements that ensures that the land no matter how big it is put into productive use.
Yeah.
So if I have 100,000 acres, right, and it's just lying fallow, if I don't have it as a ranch and I'm sort of, growing animals or whatever it is, then I get to pay a lot more. Yeah.
But they can actually also play around with the law. So you have maybe 100 acreage and you don't do anything, it remains fallow, as you say. Then when, maybe it's 3 years, if maybe that will become a law. The third is when now you start tilling. So there's a lot of activity that is seen. Yeah. So that one really breaks the cycle of 3 years.
No. That is obvious. People will put it in. You'll put it in the law. Yeah. Yeah. That it needs to have been productive for so long.
Okay.
So you're given. It needs to have been productive for over 60% of the time. So you put the law in, and if it's not productive for 60% of that 3 years, it's taken back.
Right.
Even if you start in the third year at shauri yako.
Could we also review the 99 years lease period? Because I think also that was heavily borrowed from the colonial past. And we still have it also here in our regulations. We still renew the 99 years lease. Can that be revised?
I think you need to look at our whole land tenure system. We've got leasehold and freehold, right? If you're going to do something, revise the whole system, why do you need freehold in this country, right? If you have freehold, it means that you have no control over what happens in that land, and you just sit and it goes. And then you have community land, right, which is part of our heritage and culture, right? So trying to change those things around by just looking at one of them, you're going to be, I think you're going to be treading in hot water. A lot of, the people who have 99 years lease, that is an attraction in terms, it's value in terms of the land. If you drop it down to 45, right, and I'm saying, fine, I'm going to come in and I'm going to only have 45 years lease, mentally people are not prepared. Yeah, it's got to be a very, very well thought out process. I think I agree with it that if you got leasehold and you're not using it, 3 years out. Yeah, and the leasehold land, if you reduce from 99, there has got to be some way of making sure it works, and there's got to be a very good reason why you're reducing from 99 to that level. Yeah, people hold 99 years leasehold. Yeah, and they're using it. So what is wrong with that? Yeah, you have farmers who are doing tea, for example, and they've been brought down to 99 years. The tea for Kericho and places like that have been on for how long now? 60, 70 years, even more, and they're going to continue.
Correct.
Right. So it's all a question of what kind of emphasis do you want to put on the lease of land in this country?
And if it's not broken, why are you bothered about it? And land, as Patrick is putting, is a very sensitive issue. So you really need to sit down and think through how we are going to deal with it. Yeah.
All right. Let me rope in Dr. Shema Cholo. We were still on our paper review. We're looking at this particular development where a lawyer wants to limits on land ownership in the country, and he has gone to the High Court to compel Parliament to enact a law spelling out the minimum and maximum acreage of land that an individual can own. And we are just juxtaposing that with where we know in this country people are owning a huge geographic expanse of land, and sometimes it is not of any material utility for them, lying idle for the longest time, and that can be actually put to good usages, optimized.
Indeed, Deba, I think the principle is good. If we can agree on the principles, one, we have a lot of land that's not effectively or properly utilized. I think just a third of a land mass is being utilized. Obviously, the two thirds, still some work has got to be done in terms of water, irrigation, and so on. It's so shameful that we have to import fruits from deserts, from Middle East, from North Africa, and the like. But having said that, also I think it's obscene to have people own hundreds of thousands of acres of land, while we have also squatters who don't have even a single 1 acre to their name. So obviously, looking at the land system is critical, Maybe lastly, in this regard, I always bring the technology side. I feel so bad that we've not done natural resource mapping. So we really don't know what wealth we have. So even though we talk of our GDP, as many have said, a lot of our wealth is underground, but nobody really knows. Maybe the colonialists did, because they were using geospatial technologies to get that information. I think as a matter of priority, we need to do natural resource mapping, and that includes our land. And then, of course, have a system that makes the most of it, not just for the individual, but for us as a country and as a society.
But I think they always do the resource mapping.
Actually, I'd like to jump in.
The Ministry of Minerals.
If I may, a good friend, the governor for Vihiga, who happens to be a specialist in this field.
Yes.
I think Vihiga County has done it, probably your county, but not many other counties have done this. But maybe Patrick wanted to chime
Yes, Patrick.
in.
Yeah, I know, I'm aware, and I was involved in this at the very beginning, that a full aerial survey of the country has been done, right? And that was done, and I think completed about 2 years ago. And I sit on the sort of on an energy and extractives group in KEPSA. And so that thing has been done for the country. All that has happened has not been released. And part of what was also done in terms of, especially on the underground resources, the country invested in what is called a cadastre. And the cadastre system is supposed to be overlaid over the resource map, and then it divides the country into units that people who want to prospect in the mining area can go digitally and book and want to say we want to sort of take over this area, right? And they can buy the data that is now available, not available yet, but I think has been sourced in terms of the resources around the country, and they can then buy the data and then decide whether they want to do more imaging, so that they can really zoom into where the resource is available. And as they do that, then they give away the rest of the land that they may have asked for at the beginning. So I think there's already a cadastre system that is actually meant to manage the way people apply for and exploit those resources. What we need is a national ordnance system, a big map that actually covers the whole country and has all the divisions of land into plots. It has if anybody is going to lay a cable, Dr. Shem here has got, with his IT business, any cable that they do, if there's any fiber optics they do, they have to apply to the national ordinance for them to actually map exactly where it's going to be done, and that stays on this national system, so that every square millimeter of this country is covered properly, and then you can actually now manage the whole system. Most countries in Europe and in the US have got a national ordnance system, right? So if you're going to cut a tree, the guy who you're applying for can actually image where that tree is, because they can tell, is this the tree you're going to cut or that one? Sitting in his office, right? And then you're given a license for those specific ones, yeah? So when you talk about knowing our natural resources, we really need to have a complete national ordinance that we can understand where things are, and it is divided into layers. So even when you talk about sectional property, the national ordinance I think I've seen the one in the UK, I've seen the one in France, and I've seen the one in Denmark. All of them, you can even you can tell on the map who owns which floor, right? On that system. So I agree.
The bulk part of our problem is not relying on professionals for particular fields. I remember at one point the AU was assisting countries to do national special data infrastructure programs. But to what extent do we use our experts? I'm not a GIS expert, but this is a subdomain within the informatics sector. So my premise is that, yes, let's get the actual professionals for those specific areas. I think if Kenyan utilized merit and professionals where they actually belong, we would go a long way. My premise is that I still don't think we have a comprehensive national resource data mapping. I think the only African country that's close to it is probably Zambia. But if Kenya has done it, I would love to see that, and I would love to engage professionals in that field to discuss that with them.
So this national ordinance that Patrick is really talking about, it has not really happened, it's never happened in this country, but how can we adopt it? Is it a sort of a strategy?
It's the Ministry of Lands and all. In fact, it should be a government, is a cross-sector strategy that we need to have as a country, whereby we agree that you're going to go onto a national platform that is going to be a repository of every single thing we have. Yeah, and it's not difficult to be done. It will take time to get the data on board, but once you got the basic system, every time anybody adds anything, you have a system whereby they have to put the new ones on. And as it may take about 5 to 7 years to map the old stuff onto it. Yeah, and all of that is existing. You can digitize a lot of the maps that are sitting in the Survey of Kenya, wherever it is, and so forth, and begin to make that as a kind of a baseline that you're putting into the system. So it's possible to do it, right? But we just need the policy and the will in the country to do that. It's going to take away a lot of power that people had in terms of controlling the area of title deeds and this and the other and that information, yeah, so that it's available in the public domain. That will make life easier. The country will be more efficient if that is done, right? And I know that there's been talk about it in the past, but I think it's been frustrated because of the people who make a living out of the opaqueness of certain systems within within government and even within the private sector. So I believe that if the government sets up a cross-sectional team, a multi-sector team to actually look at this, the benefits of doing it, I think, are immense in terms of just managing the country, the data information systems. Look at this addressing system that we're trying to do in the country, where they are trying to sort of have each plot given a number. So if you're on a road, you're on Koinange Street, you have Koinange Street starting from number 1 to number 77, right? And you have a proper address. So if I say I'm on number 1 Koinange Street, I know exactly where that is.
You are.
The national addressing system, Jabal, is a segment. I think Communications Authority is working on that. But you find a number of arms of government and private sector sometimes working in silos. The only thing that's holding e-commerce or online trading to take root in Kenya is that absence of national addressing system. But some work is being done, but can it be done in a comprehensive context where there are laws that support it and everybody gets engaged and is explained to them why this is beneficial and why when the world is suffering from supply chain problems or challenges and logistics, e-commerce is the way to go, and Kenya sits on it very well, the aspect of digital economy. But we need to address deal with that issue of national
It's possible if you read the papers, they say we are not going to have these 10 years of going to people's in the night and asking how many kids you have. and I remember almost 5 years ago, I almost went to a fight by the director then of Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Mwangi, Zakaria, and now it's on. There's no reason why the chief or the sub-chief will not know how many kids were born in that village, who died, and you get that data on a daily basis. So it's possible. It can be done.
It can be done.
I'm so excited that we don't have to have people in the night asking how many you have in the family. And that is the way to go. It's to me, it probably up to speed, so that by a week you know how many people you have.
Thank you.
In the country.
All right, allow me to rope in Bunyasi Sakwa, and of course I was just reserving him for a while. so that we can congratulate you, first of all, for your new appointment as the chair of Kenya Vision 2030.
Thank you.
And you're just sitting next to your predecessor there, who was the
No,
director.
I was not the chair.
No, I say the director general.
Oh, yes.
So there's a lot of exchanging of notes that has to be done today here in the show.
In this club, you must be a chair to be this, except you and I.
I'm going to be a chair.
Except you and I.
He's our chair.
But
Of course.
you used to be the immediate chair as well. At least you've been a chair. So we want to thank you so much and congratulations. I'll just give each and every one of you an opportunity to... Also, we can discuss truly this particular baton that you've been given as a Vision 2030. People thought 2030 is far away. Right now, we're only talking of barely 7 years now to the fruition of Vision 2030. What has been the hallmarks, the challenges that you'll be facing as well. People thought it will fall through the cracks with the Big Four agenda. What was really a duplication, people would say. But first of all, when you received this news, where were you?
And what did you do?
What were you doing? Was it via the radio that you're sitting by, listening to the news?
Thank you very much, Debal, and thanks colleagues who are on the panel. It's nice to be here. I received the news on Friday morning. I think they had, some people had seen it in the night, people who stay on the news online channels in the night. Someone woke me up and said, are you aware of this? And I have a bad network in my house. So I couldn't get the full story. So I just spent the rest of Friday doing my own things. But that's how I got the news, and I came up on Monday and went by the office and so on. I think the idea of having frontier thinking, a sort of futuristic thinking, is very important. It's almost true in all sectors in which we work. It's a lot more important in an economy as a whole, in a country as a whole, looking at the issues we are likely to face 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Some you can look into much more distant future, others you can only look at nearby future, because it's so complex, you can't project reliably very far out into the future. So, yes, I think it started with a bang, with the President Kibaki, who himself, I think, was at ease with that concept of thinking distant and working short, medium, and in a long time within that horizon. Then he had James Mwangi, who is also an ideas man, and so it worked very well. He didn't sort of transition the administration so smoothly. So I think there was sort of variable emphasis on it, and it has suffered somewhat for that reason. And I think now with the new emphasis on the economy, beginning with the bottom up, I think it's curious and people are eager now to know what does it mean 10 years from now, 15 years or 20 years from now, if we continue on this trajectory. So I think it will have some room again. I have not yet gotten into it. I'm just learning about it in terms of factuals, where we are, what has been achieved and so on. And in a few weeks we shall begin to think about, bring up some agenda for discussion among the stakeholders that are most important.
All right, thank you. Gichuru Wanaina, you want to chime in a bit as the former Director General?
I had a chat with him, by the way.
You had a chat with him already?
Oh, yes. I couldn't have missed that.
Thanks, John, for that. And yes, we did and have a cup of tea, and I mean a cup of tea. Interesting that to have someone like I know who can see forward. I think the point he raised was important, that, and those who are in the vision initially, what Kibaki really told us, no, we can't just be waking up and doing things. We need to see where we are headed down the road. And he formed a team which went all over the world, looking, benchmarking with Singapore. I'm happy that Patrick had a stay in Malaysia, a beautiful country. Turkey, and came with the Vision 2030. Let me say Kibaki, then Head of Public Service, Muthaura Francis, people like James, which I had an opportunity to work with. Interesting in that the country was saying this is where we want to be. High quality life for all Kenyans. And apparently that the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals 2030, and thanks to Engineer Mbogo Kamau, borrowed a lot from the Vision 2030. If you do a mapping, you actually see the relation between the two. But what is important is to see the current administration. How do we look at what David D is handing, the National Economic Council, and a good interview for him. Was it yesterday or the other day with the Citizen, David? How do we then, as Vision 2030 Delivery Board and the Secretariat, really gel and link with that? Because we are for all doing the same purpose. And as Patrick would recall, during the vision, we had the National Economic and Social Council. People from everywhere, the ideas, and then there was a think tank for government. I see the National Economic Council as a think tank. Then the wisdom was, this is the think tank, who are the implementers? Who gets done? And this was now how the Vision Delivery Board and Secretariat came into play. And that role can still be enhanced. So we see the David's team really doing all the serious thinking where we are headed, but you have an implementing. We are really not implementers, ensuring that the ministries, counties, department, agencies really do implement. And I'm probably more specific, and I charge to the chair of Vision Delivery Board. How do we focus? How do you see ourselves in line with what the agenda is of more productivity, particularly when you look at food? So my brother has something cut for him. It's important that he consult very strongly with the government and be a part of, is a creation of government leader. But there are challenges there, and I suppose he is strong in doing that. And I wish him well and congrats for this responsibility. And I think he's capable.
Right.
And if need be, there are people within even here. I don't have to go very far. If you want to reach out the diaspora, the chair is here. If you want to put in the private sector, Patrick's here. If you want to reach the academia, I'm here.
If you want to reach the media, we will support you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
And these tenders, of course, they'll be put out in the public, but I'm not saying this. They should come to Standard Group. The job is half done. Half done. Yes.
Absolutely. And as very clear in the book, in the Bible, that if the leg says I'm the most important, what will the eye say? So you have that perhaps to see we are in harmony.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Patrick, you want to weigh in? Just to
encourage
and congratulate him?
Just to congratulate the Shimio here on his appointment. I think you've got a tall order in that place. I think you've got only another 7 years to come to the end.
7, yeah.
And I think the key thing is taking stock and revising and looking at. I think it's now time to start looking at the next
beyond 2030.
Yeah, beyond 2030, what is there? And I think Vision 2030 was Vision 2030. It's we've had its successes, it's had its failures. Some of the implementing agencies below the Vision Delivery Secretariat probably have not really worked the way they should have worked because of one reason or another, either government funding or the people there didn't actually quite do what needed to be done. And even the government itself, in terms of doing its MTP, the medium-term plans, which are sort of drawing down on the vision and then including that in the planning, every 5 years. That's the way it's supposed to work. But somehow that mechanism, whilst it works at the policy level, once it goes below that, it actually gets diluted very quickly. And you don't actually get the feedback to say that this is what we have moved, and then you can aggregate it to say that the country has moved from A to B. And what happened as well was that Vision 2030 was brought in, devolution came in, right? And I think the alignment of devolution with Vision 2030 and the way it works, I think something needs to be done in that area. Because devolution means there's a lot more freedom in terms of direction at the devolved level. And there needs to be a mechanism that sort of somehow still allows the freedom, but within the strategy, right? Which is what happens in the private sector. And if you find that the strategy is not really going to help, there needs to be a mechanism right from the grassroots up to say, this is not working. It may not be working in, say, 60% of the counties, right? And we need to then review it. So the vision, great you have a job to do, and I think you're well, you're well pleased to try and navigate the next 5 to 7 years to make sure that we are able to sort of get an even clearer vision beyond that.
Yeah. Right, Shyam.
Allow me also, Debal, to add my voice to compliment Mheshimiwa. One of the meritorious appointments is his. I think we wouldn't get many better people to be in that position. And going forward, apart from working on completing the 7 years, obviously part of that time needs to be spent on evolving the Vision 2063. In that regard, Kenya could as well be one of the first African countries to align to the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. I recall, I think Rwanda was one of the first, if not the first, the second country in Africa to come up with a long-term vision. That was Vision 2030. Sorry, Vision 2020. That's the Rwandese one. The difference between their Vision 2020 and our Vision 2030 was that the Rwandese people, to a large extent, were very much involved. There was proper public participation in coming up with it. In fact, I remember a friend from Germany asking someone, what's this Vision 2020 that even when I use public transport, the matatus or the taxis, everybody's talking about Vision 2020. In fact, there were even kiosks around like what you call the back streets of Nairobi, for example, River Road. You go to Kigali, like you find kiosks called Vision 2020, meaning this is something that the Rwandese embraced fully. I'm hoping that when we start working on the Vision 2063 for Kenya, which I hope maybe in the second or third year of chairman, he'll start working on, that we ensure it's bottoms up in line with the government philosophy, that it's not top down. Vision 2030 was good, but we had the professionals bring it on to Kenyans, which wasn't bad, but there was very little in terms of bottoms up. Like the Kenyans did with the constitution, there should be a bonus of Vision 2063. To an extent, that thing is almost as important, if not more important than the Katiba. I'm being a bit careful not to overstep, but it's so critical that you have a long-term vision. It's a bit unfortunate that the Jubilee administration, in a way, kind of put it aside, even though we had Big Four agenda yes, which borrowed to a large extent, but there wasn't equal emphasis on Vision 2030. The NESC in particular was kind of like forgotten. I'm hoping that the new administration is going to reactivate. And I agree with my colleagues. That's the way to go. You must have long-term. You think long-term even as you implement short-term.
So, Professor Kituro, do you think in any way the Big Four agenda scuttled the whole process of Vision 2030? And so people are split, duplication?
No. Yes. Yeah, and I also want to make it clear that Botswana was the first country in Africa, 2016. Their vision was 2016. And I was happy that when it was coming to an end, I went there and they were asking, what is this you're doing, Vision 2030? And it's interesting because their 2016, it had 7 pillars and our own values. So they went back to build a nation to the ethos. And then now the second one, I think it's 20-something, is now on the infrastructure. Now, and this is a mistake, and I'm trying to make it as clear as possible. And Patrick, if I don't make it as clear, you can chip in. Big Four was a part of Vision 2030. Big Four was never a Vision 2030 as a whole. What the Big Four, it took 4 items. It took agriculture, it took housing, it took health, and manufacturing. Now, agriculture and manufacturing are still in the economic period. Excuse me. Housing and health are still in the social pillar. What the Jubilee government, in its wisdom, which I think was right, is to say we can fast track things within the Vision 2030, and we can fast track these 4. Why? Because the impact they have in terms of the quality of life for people. So then it's never. But by and large, we must agree that the Jubilee government dropped the ball in terms of comparing how Kibaki and the head of public service really looked at the Vision 2030. I do recall we used to meet every month on a Friday because this was a nation in a hurry. And we'll meet at Kenya School of Government. And Francis Mudhaura, a very honest and intelligent person, was chairing that meeting. And all the PSCs were part of it, and a few people from the private sector. And we will start a meeting at 9, have lunch, and finish at 5. The afternoon was to tell Shem, you are the PS for education. This is what we have agreed. Go start. Monday, they'll be there on their table. So it worked because the head of the public service was chairing it. Now, get out of it the issue of Hague. We get Kenya as head of public service, who never attended. Even Mudhaura's time, he was actually forced to come and attend the meeting by Mudhaura. Kenya, with all due respect, the technocrats took a whole responsibility in forwarding the Vision 2030. It never took that. Now, it went to the level now, the PSCs were the ones coming. It has gone to the level now, the PSCs don't go anymore. They send their technical people. Now, you can see now, if a decision is going to be made, the stages they have to go through. And the president, there was an interesting scenario where the president, Uhuru Kenyatta then, was the head of the National Economic and Social Council. Unfortunately, he never attended meetings. And that team of experts, think tanks, were no nonsense people. They actually complained to the president, Kibaki, then. The current president, who didn't take it kindly. So when he comes in as the president, he has a cold approach to Vision 2030. And it sort of went down even the first term, and I could see there are a lot of things with the devolution, which is a fantastic idea. And one thing Kibaki had said, I'll deliver one thing. If I can't deliver anything on the Vision 2030, there's one thing I must deliver, the Constitution. And he delivered, which was important because it gave us our thinking in the next years. So in terms of coming back to your question, the Big Four was part of Vision 2030. It was never meant to take over Vision 2030. If you look at the medium-term plan 4, and look at it in terms of even what the Kwanzaa government is thinking about, and that's linkage, Mheshimiwa need to come very, very strongly. The technocrats in government have worked on medium-term plan 4. It was not released until they knew who was coming to government. It could not be released until 9th of September. Then they waited the petition. When it was known in somewhere September, they went back. And I remember they went to Nakuru for almost a month. They now looked at manifesto and incorporated in the Vision 20. And that has always been the trend, that you wait on the government which comes to power, you bring the agenda on board. And Jubilee second time they promised those people. It came there. I would urge really, 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 and I've had in the vibes, cold water being poured on the NP4. For the Kwanzaa government, David D and his team to look at it and see how they can actually move forward in terms of that. So it was part of Vision 2030. Even what the Kwanzaa is suggesting is also among the Vision 2030. They had really thought through about the whole thing, where Mackenzie came and helped to do the economic pillar, the Kenyans did the political and the social pillar. Yeah.
Right, thank you. So, Bunyasi Sakwa, yes, you've heard in the checkered past that it has been, it doesn't matter who has been there before. What really matters is you now. Yeah, they say you are the one to finish strong. Yeah, if we go to Vision 2030, we'll always remember the chair was Bunyasi Sakwa, not the other chairs. It is you now who's the face. So,
and
I'm grateful.
I'd go back to even vehicles here. You remember, they used to have a Vision 2030.
Yep.
I remember if you go, Patrick, past on the shop on your right is on the way. As you're on Lemurudu.
Yeah,
there's a shop on the way.
Yeah.
If you go past, before you start descending, there was a shop actually selling vanished, and it was Vision 2030.
Yes.
I always used to see.
Futuristic. Yeah, very futuristic. Anyway, yes, please. Yeah.
One thing I may want to recommend to my good friend Mheshimiwa Chairman now.
But why don't we call him Mheshimiwa? You have been there, isn't it?
yes.
And you know, people may forget my name. Sarkwise.
Or even Mheshimiwa John. But yeah, a very important lady is currently in town, Professor Jean-Marie Obi of SOAS, that's School of African Studies, London. She is a specialist on China. In fact, she's director of the China Institute at SOAS. It's quite a contrast that you have somebody from the West who specialized in China. And I had opportunity to spend time with her. One of my major concerns was, how did China manage within a span of 2-3 decades to move such a significant fraction of their people out of poverty? The one major thing I got from her, and she's working with the LREP, I think the leadership of those 14, 15 counties, in terms of, she specializes on what she calls landscaping. In fact, she believes the 3 major pillars to growth: landscaping, digital economy, IT, as well, or particularly, specifically coding, and then the creative arts. She believes that those are major areas to get Kenyan youth out of poverty. I couldn't agree more to an extent, but the interesting thing I gathered was China didn't quite borrow, copy and paste the Western thinking. They did a bit of that because they had to be look a little bit of free market, but they also had indigenous systems. In fact, one of the things she's been working on is there is, I forget what the community is, which is becoming extinct, in particular their language. They are trying to reconstruct, use artificial intelligence to reconstruct that. I think indigenous knowledge, and there was a lot of it that our people had. When we bring the new ideas, not that they are bad, but we must blend them with the traditional systems. And that's where, in my view, bottom up can never be faulted, because then you go to people with the domain knowledge, combine that with the new thinking, and then you have best results. That's the only suggestion I would want to make to Chair. But otherwise, congratulations, and we wish him well.
Right. Thank you. Should I say something very quickly? Yeah, thanks very much, colleagues, for all the comments. And I think Professor Gituro has said things that me, as a new boy on the block, would not even have dared say. But I think that has been the history, and there seems to be quite a lot more in it. But I think what has happened is that the meta structure, at that time, the presidency itself, the council, the Economic and Social Council, being at the top with all of the top brass civil servants and the politician president himself taking a keen interest was very, very important. That has been disjointed somewhat. But it looks like there's an interest in reviving it in some way, because we don't have a National Economic and Social Council now, but we probably will have, so I understand. And what we have in the Council of Economic Advisors, and I met Dr. Ndi for a lengthy conversation, he said, no, they're not interested in any of these issues of futuristic that and that. That's not their domain now, he says. They're working more or less like the Council of Economic Advisors of the US presidency. They are dealing with the here and now, and they are helping guide the president in his decision making on the economy and whatever aspects the decisions the president is working on. So there are people who help to pave, I guess, but also navigate with the president along the way. But they don't have the time or even the responsibility to do the futures thing. Now, if that existed, they are in a position to borrow it, and as they advise the president, they take it into account, as it were. So we're going to have, it's going to take a little while to retinker this in a way. There's alignment and there's buy-in and so on. So that's something we're going to work with. One of the areas we really need to get not buy-in, but we get effective representation is the private sector. This has had it must be one of the biggest boards in the country. Every PS is the member of the board. They may send representation. But the private sector has 7 of those. And now it's about time to get new representation for the 7. So one of the things that we shall be seeking soon, after we get the basics clear, is to seek the representation of those 7, seek the authorities to nominate the 7 that we need to go on the board. And I presume they will talk to private sector people. It won't be within the powers of the chair, no, but I mean we can facilitate by pushing it up to get decisions made. But I think it's certainly it's not an easy task. Fortunately, even if I get additional gray hairs, they won't show. Because I have enough on the head already. So that,
yeah, but doesn't it astound you when Devin D, who chairs now the National Economic Council, for the president, when he says that we're not really concentrating on the future, it's not futuristic, it's for here and now, and we borrow heavily from the United States what they're doing.
Yes.
I mean, for me, I think there is where we miss it. If China, that you're giving us as an example here from Dr. Shemo Chodo, can actually project in 100 years how that
but
will
even
be,
in China,
yes, even in China,
the institutions are different.
Institutions are different.
Yes, the Chinese have become very strong in think tanks. And the US has
But
a lot
we'll
of
expect,
think tanks. You borrow from those think
you'll
tanks.
expect, especially someone with the intellectual provenance of Devin D, will actually be very futuristic. Because this is where we are. We can actually be concentrating on now, and then we find ourselves...
No, I think he has the capacity to look into the future, but it would be best if you operated in a system in which the frontier thinking is done by the think tanks that exist in the country, in the region, wherever they might be, from which they borrow, interpret, and give advice to the presidency going forward. They don't themselves have to create that. And him, by training, of course, he understands the significance and what the future, why it's important to know about the future. But in terms of a mandate, they look at slightly different mandate, and they are the finer details.
Right.
The bulk.
Yeah. Can I just take a short break? When we circle back with Patrick and you as well, then we look at also what is on the front page of the Business Daily today. Delarue, Kenya stoppage triggers checkbook crisis. We were just discussing about Delarue the other time and them folding their shop here in the country. And this is a block back right now that will be meant to, of course, deal with. Banks ask customers to stockpile checkbooks. UK printers to suspend Kenya operation in March. There was a tiff there on the tax row between Delarue and KRA. And also Treasury plans to deal with Kenya's debt crisis by 2026 is another story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily. KRA has missed its target by 27 billion shillings in Ruto presidency. Kenya Revenue Authority misses its revenue collection targets by 27 billion shillings in 3 months to December amid President William Ruto's aggressive push to weed out tax evaders and boost receipt. All that is tucked away on page 2 of the Business Daily this morning. Plus, when we circle back, of course, we look at what is happening in the flower sector. Things are not really coming up roses at the flower sector as well, with water tariff sparking up by 400%. That is bound to adversely affect that particular sector that has been a huge economic earner to the GDP. We take a short break right now. Don't go away.